Hello. Wow, this has been quite a week, don't you think? It's sure been different for us, and I'm sure the same is true for you. I can't remember a week in my life that I felt so little control as I have this last week. Everything has been turned upside down. We were shopping like crazy. We were trying to remember everything we might need in the next few days. We were rushing around. It was just crazy, and I'm sure that you would say the same was true for you. I know I've experienced a wide range of emotions during this time. Some fear, anxiety, maybe you have had some of these same emotions, followed by times of peace, which has been good, and I trust the same is true for you as well. I know your daily schedule has been changed. Mine certainly has been. I think everybody's has been. Maybe you've had different concerns, growing concerns this last week as you think about different people that are very important in your life, maybe older people, parents or grandparents that you're concerned about their health, if they'll be safe. You probably even wrestled with making decisions what to purchase. Should you get one more of this or two more of this, or should you run one last time and grab this? I know we were remembering this little item and that little item, contact solution, this kind of cream, this kind of toothpaste. All these different things at the very last minute and rushing around and trying to get them. It was actually kind of a relief when Friday morning came around and we didn't have to rush. We've already got what we needed done. I know there's other concerns also. Maybe some are concerned about the long-term effect this might have on their jobs. It seems like just in a matter of a few days, everything has become unsettled and shaky. Maybe you're already longing for the good old days. A few weeks ago, when things seem to be so much more in our control. I want to encourage you this morning that nothing was more in control of you, more in your control a few weeks ago. We just thought it was more in our control. It was just as shaky and out of our control a year or two ago as it is today. We just didn't realize it because we had been deceived into thinking that we were in control. And now we've been humbled. And that can be an absolutely wonderful thing. We must not miss this opportunity to grow, that we never would have grown in this way apart from this disruption to our lives. So I hope you've already come to the conclusion that you never want to go back to thinking that you were in control. It was a false security. It wasn't true. You weren't in control. And we don't want our lives to be grounded on things that are not true or deception. Jesus warns us about building our lives on a shaky foundation. He says that we must not do it because such lives will not endure when difficulty comes. So I'm sure that many of us would like our lives to go back to what we consider to be normal. I trust that you want to stay humbled and that you want your new perspective of reality to be with you from here on out, that you don't want it to fade away when hopefully things start becoming more normal, and that you won't be tempted to feeling like you're regaining this control. Because the control of this world and the control of our lives, even our next breath, is something that has not been given to us. It's humbling, and it's absolutely true. The book of James speaks about the arrogance that can creep into our lives. And James tells us as Christians that it's evil. Evil is the word he uses, to let arrogance become our perspective. And we have a wonderful opportunity during this time, these days, maybe weeks, possibly even a few months, to let this truth sink in that we are not in control. And the even greater truth that God is in control. It's on this solid rock of a foundation that our Christian life can become one of the most beautiful gifts. A gift of trust and peace and joy and rest as we are in the loving Savior's arms. I've been thinking about James chapter 4 this week, and I'd like to read this passage this morning. It's not a passage that you're unfamiliar with, but it has a lot more meaning this week than it has in the past, at least to me, because it's written to those who have been deceived into thinking that they are in control of their lives. Let's read James chapter 4, verses 13 to 17. Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town, spend a year there, and trade and make a profit. Yet you do not know what tomorrow will bring. What is your life? It is even a vapor that appears for a little time and then vanishes. Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that. As it is, your boast is you boast in your arrogance. All such boasting is evil. So whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. So I was thinking about this passage this week, especially verse 13. It says, "Come now, you who say, today or tomorrow we will go into such and such a town and spend a year there and trade and make a profit." Right now, we understand what an arrogant statement that is. A few weeks ago, we might have made a plan to go to another country, certainly another city, never thought once or twice about whether it was in our control or not. But now we can't travel to another country. We can't even travel to another town or even leave the house to conduct business. And we honestly don't know when we'll be able to. And it's not just our country. This is a worldwide situation that we find ourselves. Over 3 billion people are in lockdown right now across the world in different degrees of lockdown. I'd say we've been humbled as a nation, but also as a world. And beyond the lack of ability to travel or do business, there's a very real threat to our physical lives, at least a very real threat to the lives of those who are older or have health problems. James says it's arrogant to think that we have control over the duration or the direction of our lives. Obviously, there's nothing wrong with making future plans or even desiring to make a profit. The problem is when we claim to have control over our future and we fail to acknowledge that God alone is in control. This might seem to be a small issue, but God says it's evil. Evil. And as we think about it, we can understand why it would be evil. There's only one God. There's only one being who is in control. And to think or to claim that we're in control of our lives is to try to push God off his throne and place ourselves in his seat. God calls this arrogance and he calls it evil. There are many variables in our life in which we are not in control. This week we were experiencing one of these variables, COVID-19. Whatever you planned, whatever you scheduled, it's canceled. Your business trip, it's canceled. Your birthday party, it's canceled. Your wedding, canceled. Even funerals are being postponed. In the past, there's been wars and economic collapses, weather events, earthquakes, tsunamis, terrorist attacks. It's good to plan, and it's good to carry out our plans, but to claim that we're in control of the outcome, James says that's empty boasting. It's empty because it doesn't have any substance, and it's boasting. It's evil because it assumes that we have control of things that are really only in the realm of God's control. He tells us that there's a second consideration as well, and that is over the duration of our lives. Not only are we not in control of what happens in the world around us, even more importantly, we don't control if we'll be alive in the future. He says in verse 15, "Instead, you ought to say, if the Lord wills, we will live and do this or that." You might not wake up tomorrow morning, is what this verse says. Or you might experience COVID-19, or someone you care about might. What is your life? It says here, it's like a vapor. It appears for a little time, then vanishes away. When I was growing up, on our way to town, we had to come down the side of this hill. At the bottom of the hill was a river with a bridge across it. And then you would cross the bridge and continue on your way. And as you came down this hill, you could see the heavy fog over the river, especially first thing in the morning. As you entered into this fog, it became so thick that you would put your headlights on, but your headlights couldn't see in front of you. And eventually you got to the place that often you would have to roll down your window, stick your head out the window, and the white line that was beside the road is what you had to watch because you couldn't see anything in front of the car. Just a white fog that completely stopped you from seeing. So you literally put your head out the window and drive with this white line, keeping this white line until you were able to get through this fog and come out the other side. But if you came that same way, maybe an hour later or 2 hours later, the sun had come out by that time and it burned off this fog and there wouldn't even be a wisp or a trace of that fog. James says, so is our life. It seems so full of substance. We're in the midst of it, when we're in the midst of it, but it can be gone in a minute. It's not enough to recognize that life is brief. Even unbelievers recognize that life is brief. If you go to the funeral of a believer or you go to the funeral of an unbeliever, the same comments will be made about how quickly life passes. The Christian must also recognize Not only that life is brief, but that God is the one who is in control of both the duration of our life and also the direction of our life, and that He is the one who is in sovereign control of those things. Chapter 4, verse 15 says, if the Lord wills, we shall live. And then it says, and do this or that. This is not a verbal formula that we should set on the end of all of our statements about the future. If the Lord wills. If the Lord wills, I'll see you tomorrow. Let's make plans to go someplace if the Lord wills. That's not the point. It's not a point of tacking that on glibly at the end of any statement we made. It's actually a heart attitude, a heart of submission, understanding that we are not in control and that we are humbly under the control of God, who has control of all things. And it's an understanding that all my plans are tentative. It was possible that the sovereign one who rules over my life might overrule my plans. He might send me in a different direction. He might bring about a different response than what I was expecting. I do make my plans. I do follow through with those plans to the best of my ability. I know the same is true for you. But we must understand that the Lord is the one who determines the outcome. Now, I've read through these passages in James chapter 4 quite a few times. Even preached through this passage before. But I can say this, it has never resonated with me as it has this week. I've been humbled. And it's quite possible that you've been humbled as well. The book of James and the rest of Scripture has been teaching this truth for hundreds of years. But I think we've only half believed it. But now we fully believe because we've experienced it. And I hope that we never forget it. James chapter 4 verse 17 says, so whoever knows the right thing to do and fails to do it, for him it is sin. This seems to be a summary of all that has been written in James up to this point. It seems that the struggle that the believers had, that James was writing to, had a struggle with omission rather than commission. He says that they were sinful by their omission, the things that they were not doing. He says, don't just hear the word, do it. He says to look after orphans and widows and to treat each person you meet the same, whether they're rich or poor. He says to put your faith into action. And most recently here in this passage that we've been looking at, he says to always acknowledge that God is in control of all the areas of your life, including your income, your plans, and how long we live. Now, I think this is a particularly important verse to us in this time in history, in this time in our lives. We still might arrogantly be thinking we got this, that we have a savings account, we have extra, we prepared for such a time as this. Or maybe we're young and we're healthy, this is not going to bother us. And even still, maybe we haven't come to a place that we understand that we are dependent on the Lord for all things. And I hope that that's not the case for you. I hope that you've seen enough already. We don't know what the future is going to bring. But I hope that you've seen enough already to realize that you don't want to miss this opportunity to place your trust firmly and solely in God's control for all things. It's also a very good challenge to us, this verse about omission, to not omit caring for others during this time. It's the very thing that James was talking about. His book is written to those who are suffering, and he warns the Christians not to be involved in sin by their omission. The very ones that James told us that were vulnerable, the poor, the widow, the orphan, those are the same ones that are still vulnerable today. And we must not live our lives of sin by omitting our God-given responsibility to care for those who are orphaned or poor or the vulnerable. James dedicates a large portion of this book teaching believers to complete their faith by their good deeds to others. And he says a real faith will have actions. It will produce fruit. It will have works. Like something as simple and as practical as giving someone who's hungry bread or a coat to someone when they're cold. This is in James chapter 2. So we have a great opportunity to show our faith, that our faith is not dead during this difficult time. That we understand that even though we might have a big stockpile of food in our kitchen, we don't trust in this. We trust in the one who provides the food. We don't trust in a 21-day lockdown as the solution to this coronavirus struggle. We trust in the great physician who can mercifully spare us or who can give us the strength to bear up under the weight of this difficulty. We don't claim to have the answers of what our future will bring. It's scary. It's difficult. We don't. We don't have the answers and we don't claim to. But we trust the one who has control, not only of the past and the present, but also control of our future. We've been humbled, and it's a great place to be. We must never go back to this arrogant attitude that I got this. I will do this and that, and it'll bring this result. I ask you, have any of your plans been changed this week? Any of your schedules changed? Of course. We're not in control. But we are filled with hope. You know, it's great to be humbled because it can lead us to a secure place of hope in something that's far more substantial than what our plans might be or the continual beating of our heart. These things that we're told, they're like fog. They're like a mist. They seem significant when you were making your plans to travel here or there or do this or that. You might have been stressing over it. You might have been working very hard on the details, and it seemed very significant to you. But here we find out that these things are not significant and not substantial. But when tested, they prove to be nothing to boast about. He calls it empty boasting, because we could be here today and gone tomorrow. But we have a great hope that will never fade away, that will always have substance, that will never change. Yes, we have been humble, but we have not been left with no place to turn. I'd like to close our time today by looking at Psalms 46. I hope this is a psalm you've been reading through these last few days. Psalms 46. Turn with me, if you would, to there. I'd just like to read the psalm and just make a few comments as we go through. Psalms 46:1 says, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in trouble. I like it. He says a very present, or my footnote says a well-proved help in trouble. We're not alone. And our God, our Father, who is in heaven, He has proven Himself to be faithful to care for those who love Him and trust in Him for thousands of years. And it says that He is our refuge. He is our place of rest. You can kind of almost picture that there's a difficult situation, and then off in the distance you see this place of refuge, and if you could just get there, you'll be safe. And He says, that is who I am. I am that. Come to me, and I will give you this refuge and this strength. And those who will come to Him, what is there to fear? Because who or what is stronger than God, in whose arms we rest? Verse 1, God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in time of trouble. Then in verse 2 he says, therefore we will not fear, though the earth gives way, though the mountains be moved into the heart of the sea, though its waters roar and foam, though the mountains tremble at its swelling. Verse 2 and 3 talk about if terrible events happen in the world, we will not fear. If flood or earthquake or hurricane or pandemic, we will not fear. But rather we will stay safe and secure in His refuge of strength. Who or what is stronger than God, in whose arms we rest? He just very clearly says that if we will find our place of refuge in Him, that there's nothing that we should fear. Verse 4 through 7 is an interesting picture. He says, there's a river whose streams make glad the city of God, the holy habitation of the Most High. God is in the midst of her. She shall not be moved. God will help her when morning dawns. The nations rage, the kingdoms totter. He utters His voice, the earth melts. The Lord of hosts is with us. The God of Jacob is our fortress. God has this place of refuge, and He says in the middle of this place of refuge is a river. It's a place of refreshment for all those who come and enjoy this place of refuge by trusting in Him. I grew up in a place where there was a lot of water. Close to me, just a few kilometers away, were two rivers that came together, and we lived kind of in the V between those rivers. So just a few kilometers to this river, a few kilometers to this river, and we lived close to a lake. And so I love water, and I spent a lot of time in water growing up, and I just love to look at water. I like to hear it. I like to smell its freshness. And so when I was a young teen, I'd have an opportunity to go out on this lake, and I'd usually take a canoe out in the lake and a paddle, and I would paddle through the lake. And one of the things that I loved to do was go to the side of the lake where there was a bunch of reeds. And I would come there as quietly as I could, because in these reeds were these blackbirds, all black with a little red and a little yellow on their wing. And they just had beautiful songs that they would sing to each other. And so I would paddle up to these birds as quietly as I could so I wouldn't scare them away. I would get maybe 3 or 4 meters away, and then I would just let the canoe coast in, not move a muscle, and I would just coast till I got within maybe a meter, almost to the place where I could reach out and touch them, hopefully before they were frightened away by me. And they would just be singing there at the top of their lungs, and all I could hear was them singing and the water lapping and just sitting there. I don't think I ever left. I always stayed until the bird flew away. I never left because it was just such a place of joy and peace and just beauty. So when he talks about a river running through this place of refuge, it really resonates with me. And it's just a beautiful picture of a place that we can go that has refreshment and peace and rest. And he says that he will keep this place for us, a secure refuge, because it says that he is in the midst of it. And he says, while this is going on within the refuge, he says, outside the nations rage, kingdoms totter and fall, the earth melts as God speaks, because the Lord of hosts of all the heavenly armies is with us. So here we got this unbelievable, peaceful situation, this refuge, a fortress that he's provided for those who trust him and love him. But outside this fortress, the world is going crazy. It's chaotic. There's kingdoms that are fighting. Some are falling. Some are conquering others. The earth is melting as God speaks. And he says that there's these two different worlds that are taking place, inside and outside the fortress. And I encourage you to stay within the fortress of refuge. Because outside is fear, anxiety, doubt, maybe from time to time even panic. I'll be honest with you, this week I was up a few times most nights. I couldn't sleep. My mind was racing through all the things that we needed to purchase to prepare for this lockdown. Certainly concerned about lots of different things, wondering worst case scenarios. Do we have this? Do we have this? What will happen? And it was a difficult time. And I'm sure that you had a few times that you were nervous as well and maybe went through some of these same emotions. He tells us here that that we need to be careful. That yes, it's wise to prepare for our families. Yes, it's wise to do the best that we can. But we can't just be hanging out on the outside of the fortress. That we need to spend time within, a place that he's provided for our care. And that if we find ourselves in a place of fear or doubt or anxiety or maybe even panic, that we will quickly come back to him. And that we'll put all of our confidence in him, the one who is in complete control of our every breath, the one who is in complete control of our future. It says in verse 8 and 9, "Come, behold the works of the Lord, how he has brought desolation on the earth. He makes wars cease to the ends of the earth. He breaks the bow and shatters the spear. He burns the chariots with fire." Pretty clear here that God is not a victim. He is not caught by surprise about what's going on in the world ever, certainly not now. It tells us that God does what he pleases, when he pleases, how he pleases. We may not understand what he's doing or why he's doing it, but this we know. He is always in control. He is sovereign over the whole world. He is sovereign over the whole universe. It tells us in verse 10, a verse you are familiar with, "Be still and know that I am God. I will be exalted among the nations. I will be exalted in the earth." Now, for some reason, this verse has had more meaning to me this week than normal. Be still and know that I am God. Now, this has kind of been forced upon us this week. Be still. What else can we do, right? But also it says, and know that it's time to give God his due credit. We have been forced to be still. Every nation in the earth, it says, will be forced to worship the Lord as they should. And it's not, that's talking about the future. It's not so hard to imagine how that would take place. You know, if you would have asked one of us 6 months ago, how could this happen? How could God do that in such a way that the nations would be forced to acknowledge him and give him credit? We might say, I don't know, I don't see how that could happen. But now just a very, very, very small event happens and the whole world is shut down. I don't think it's very hard for us to understand or how to imagine how quickly that God could bring it back. But for now, we have the choice. We have the choice to worship him as the one who is in control of all things. We have the choice to lose our arrogance and to give him the credit for our daily provision, for our every breath, and to understand that he is the one who has given us all things. One day, we're told he will crush the arrogant. As we read through the book of Revelation, it's talking about the last days, God tells us many things that will make this pandemic extremely small. So small, I think, in comparison that I'm certain during those days nobody will even bring it up. It'll never even cross their mind that this is something to compare it to. We're told in those last days that God will use plagues to crush the wicked, the arrogant. He will use earthquakes, wars. These are all happening at the same time. Famine, hailstorms, poisonous water, darkness, changes in the heavens with meteorites falling, fire, letting demons loose to torment people, painful sores. The sun has scorching heat. It says that there will be lightning and thunder like we've never experienced before. So I think we can confidently say that God will crush the wicked, and every individual and every nation, every corner of the earth will exalt him as the one who is in control. And anyone who claims that they're in control is arrogant, and God says they're evil. Verse 11 says, "The Lord of hosts is with us, the God of Jacob is our fortress." It says we don't need to fear. The Lord of hosts is with us. The one who is the commander of all the armies of heaven, who has control of all things, he is with us, and the God of Jacob is our refuge. He has provided a place for us to come and find peace and rest during this time. And the invitation is to come into this place of refuge that God has freely made available to all of us who will trust in him, to all those who will look to him for their deliverance, who will look to him for their salvation. And he says here it's a place of peace and joy and rest. And it's not something that we have to wait for the future to enter into. We're told this refuge is available for us now. First, we must be humbled. And then we need to turn to the Lord. He's made it crystal clear in Scripture that Jesus Christ is the door. We can enter in by only by and through Jesus. We're told, "I am the way, the truth, and the life. No one comes to the Father except through me." This week has been one I don't think I'll ever forget. Maybe I will. Doesn't seem like I will now, and maybe you won't either. I can honestly say I've been humbled. I'm thinking differently. I'm considering things differently. Things that were important to me several months ago are not as important. Things that weren't as important to me a few months ago are more important to me. My perspective has completely changed. I think it's a good thing. I know it's a good thing in my case. I hope the same has been true for you. You've probably been humbled as well. I know the whole world has been humbled. What business or individual do you know that had COVID-19 in their plans for 2020? I'm sure the Olympic Committee didn't. I'm sure many other sports and business ventures didn't. But God did. And now we must also, because he's the one who's in control. We've been humbled, but we've not been left without hope. We have a place of refuge and a fortress in which God's presence dwells. We can't enter, however, filled with evil arrogance, thinking that we're in control. The refuge is only for those who will humbly trust in the Lord. Those who come empty-handed to the Lord and say to him, "You alone are the one in which I trust." But for those who will humbly enter, he says, "I have a fortress, a refuge, a place of peace, a place of rest, joy by the river, even as chaos and disruption are taking place on the outside." We have been humbled, so let us enter into the place of refuge and experience his peace that passes all understanding. I also want to remind us from chapter 4 of James, verse 17, to not allow ourselves to fall into the sin of omission during this time, to omit caring for those who are in need. Galatians chapter 6, verse 10 reminds us, "So then, as we have opportunity, let us do good to everyone, and especially to those who are of the household of faith." We're told that a living faith produces works. It does not omit caring for those who are hurting around them, whether that be physically hurting, emotionally, financially, spiritually. It's very practical in the book of James. So let us not fall into the sin of omission during this time, while we are thinking about our family and thinking about ourselves and thinking about, do we have all these things taken care of? Because our trust is in the Lord, and we don't want to be characterized by fear during these times. We've just read how we are not in control, but the Lord is. So let us not be characterized by fear, but rather let us be characterized by love, so that we take this time to care for the needs of those who are hurting during this time. It's a great opportunity for us as a church. It's a great opportunity for us as families and individuals to lift up our head and to be thinking about other people. So yes, it's been a crazy week. Would I have chosen it? Probably not. Am I sad that it has happened? No, I'm not. But I hope that the same is true for you. I hope that as you've had time to rest, even just for a few days here, Friday, Saturday, Sunday, and we have a few days in our future that are going to be different days, quieter days than maybe in our past. I encourage you to find comfort in knowing that we haven't lost control. We never had control. And that's what the Bible's been saying for thousands of years. We just never fully believed it. And so we're actually blessed to be able to see reality for what it is. So I encourage you, take this time, use it wisely, be encouraged, don't be fearful. Our God is the Lord of hosts. There's nothing that is too big for him. So find your trust and your rest and your peace in him. If there's something that you need during this week, reach out to other people. We as a church will be more than happy to help you in any way that we can. We have a lot of different resources available through different people, and we will certainly use those to the full extent of our ability because we want to take care of one another and to show that love for one another. So I leave you with this, and I just trust that this will be an encouraging time for you and that you'll use these 3 weeks in a way that will change your life.